The most exciting part of a vacation stay at a home rental? Easy. It's being greeted upon arrival with a rusted lockbox affixed to the underside of a stranger's condo. Yeah, you simply twist knobs, click gears, jiggle it, and then rip it off its moorings, and voila! Your prize is a key to a questionable home rental and maybe tetanus. When you just want to get your vacation started by actually getting into your room, it matters where you stay. At Hilton, we deliver your key right to your phone on the Hilton Honors app. Hilton for the stay.
Today on CityCast Boise, what are the essential rules to surviving and even thriving in our city? From fashion choices to how to talk about politics, it can feel like there's a secret recipe to success here. So we're resharing our cheat code with a local survival guide from contributor Nick Kwa and our own Hey Boise newsletter editor, Blake Hunter. It's Tuesday, July 9th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Nick, what would be your first rule for someone who maybe recently moved here or even someone who may have lived here for a while but wants to survive Boise even better?
First of all, thank you for thinking that I am surviving. I am clutching by my nails. I'm barely surviving. I barely have any of my face on this morning. Let's see. Okay, so I think the context here might be useful. I moved here in 2019, though I should defend myself by saying that my wife is from here, therefore we have roots. Please don't hate me. And I think the one thing that I wish I knew going in is to get some trail shoes. I mean, one of the bigger delights of Boise, one of the whole point of it really is access to nature. Like it's you can get to really good trails really, really quickly. But boy, can those trails wear your shoes out. So pay a visit to your local store to REI. Get some trail shoes. Really, this might not seem like a walking city, but you'll be doing a lot of walking outside of the city.
Yeah, it's worth the investment.
Absolutely.
Blake, what about you? What are your tips for surviving or thriving in Boise?
Mine is kind of related. If I think of trails and breweries on kind of the same two-pronged fork of Boise culture.
the two pillars holding up the city.
of really pillars of the community. Yeah. I think one of my rules, which it took me a long time to get into this, which is why I think that it's one of the first things that come to mind is even if you don't think that breweries are for you, try a couple out.
Okay.
They still might not be for you. The problem is that that's just where everyone goes. So you kind of have to follow the people. They've built it and we've come, and now some of the rest of us are who don't love beer as much are kind of left by the wayside. And so I would just say, check out a few breweries, even if you don't think that they're for you, and you might surprise yourself. You might really fall in love. I mean, it's true. There are some really, really cool local businesses and a lot of cool folks in the industry here. So put in a little bit of time there.
Wait, Lindsay, are you a big brewery person?
So kind of. I enjoy going to breweries. I maybe a little backstory. I was raised Mormon, so I never drank until I was 28. And I didn't really grow up in a culture of drinking. And so I drink socially. So if you invite me to a brewery, I will totally go.
Oh, I have that relationship with cigarettes, totally, for sure.
Yeah. So I always enjoy being invited to a brewery or when somebody tells me about a brewery. And I just, some, like you said, Blake, I really agree. There are lots of different types of breweries. And so I think that's been fun to go to different ones, and there are definitely some I really vibe with and some where I'm that maybe wasn't my scene, but I get why it's really, really fun. So yeah, I don't necessarily it might not be the top of my, I'm not going to come up with the idea let's go to a brewery, but if you invite me, I love to go. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that it's worthwhile to, I think, especially if you maybe are new here, you don't have someone to invite you, I would suggest just look a couple up. I would maybe suggest Payette or Lost Grove to kind of get a nice little bite, a little vibe of the city, and just take yourself out. Just go. Maybe if you have a friend that you can go with, that'd be great. But you could also go by yourself.
That gets at a really interesting challenge, right? Of if you move here for the first time, how do you crack into the scene? Breweries are a pretty good starter kit. If you can find a somewhat accommodating or accessible crew of people around.
Yes, I think those are definitely a good way to kind of find your people or create the atmosphere where you can really chat, which is something people in Boise talk about, that when they first move here, like you said, like it can be kind of tricky to find people and connect with people. It's so funny you brought up hiking and kind of being outdoorsy or brewing. My very first tip is maybe not as much a rule or a tip as it's a like giving permission. I feel like when you live here, you feel like you have to be really outdoorsy. And
Yeah.
especially when I first moved to Boise, I felt a lot of this pressure to be really outdoorsy. And, and when somebody asks you, like, what do you like to do? You have to say, I like to hike
Yeah.
or ski or mountain bike or camp. So my first rule would definitely be you can be casually outdoorsy, and that's cool. That is still, you're just as much a part of Boise as someone who's hiking every weekend or mountain biking is their passion. Because I like the outdoors, but I like them casually.
100%.
Absolutely. Same deal breweries, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very casual about how I approach things.
If you invite me, yeah.
yeah. I might consider it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you invite me on a hike, I'll come. I'll go down to the green belt. I love the green belt. That's
Yeah.
a very nice curated outdoor space I enjoy. But yeah, if you invite me camping, sure, but I'm not going to, take the initiative to probably go camping on my own.
How
Yeah.
would you spend your free time? Like, what's your default? What would you usually like gravitate towards?
I love being in my backyard. That's my outdoor
Yeah.
space I love. I've kind of just
Got that gardening situation going? Incredible.
kind of. I'm starting gardening. I've got like my little patio setup that I love. I've got my squirrels that I feed. I'm really leaning into like the mid 30s and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So
That sounds amazing.
absolutely. Nick, what other essential rules do you have for Boise?
That's interesting. I was sort of reflecting a little bit of what y'all been saying, and I have this thing scribbled down of like just developing relationships with local spots, but I think that's kind of true of a lot of places. With Boise specifically, I really want to champion the Y here. Like, I go to the YMCA on State Street. It's like near downtown. First of all, it's a really great, affordable way to have access to fitness equipment and fitness classes. But it is a really great community center. Go enough times, go with enough of a routine, and you will like see the same cast of characters in and out. And it's a super like lovely place to hang out and meet people as well. But like in general, I think developing a circuit of your usuals, and Boise has a ton of those places. Your usual bookstore for rediscovered books downtown. Your usual music shop, which Cheers Record Exchange. Get out into the physical spaces like that. That in general is good for any city. But in Boise, there's such really clear pillars of community and creative community here, and it's fun to be in those physical spaces.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say you brought up rediscovered books. If I'm not in my backyard, I'm probably there. I should just like cut part of my paycheck, just send it to rediscovered books because that's someplace I love to be. Or I think you brought up something that is really, really something people love about Boise is this ability to build kind of this network or places where you feel comfortable being and doing the activities that you love. Blake, do you have any more survival rules? How are you surviving?
Yeah, I really kind of building off of what you're saying there, Nick. I really like that because Boise really does have a bit of a small town feel. And so I think that it's really important to kind of like build up your routines and really get to know the place. Along with that, as a kind of a caveat to that, an addendum, I would say, is just know that like a small town, Boise will kind of wait you out. A lot of Boiseans have been here for many generations. And if you're new here, you probably know that there's a lot of reactions kind of running the gamut to your presence here. And so I don't know. I guess I would just remind people that like a lot of people who live here have it really stuck in their heads. Like if you weren't born here, if you weren't raised here, you cannot be an Idahoan. And that is just, it's kind of ridiculous to me because like if you're living and interacting in the community and part of the community, then you are one of the people here. But yeah, people just get really hung up on like calling themselves an Idaho native. And I'm like, white person named Bethany, you are not a native. You are not indigenous to this land, because I'm really tired of people whose families have been here for 100 years calling themselves natives. And I'm like, you're not native. Anyway,
Blake.
sorry, that's a little diatribe there.
No, I'm so glad you were on that soapbox. Blake, I feel like you're just reading my list at this point.
Oh, great. Okay,
because
good.
literally my next bullet point was be prepared because people are going to use genealogy credentials
Yes.
in every situation.
Yeah.
Interesting. Tell me
Yes.
more. Tell me more.
Yeah. So I think you can run into this in almost every situation where, of course, when somebody's running for office or some kind of a political
Yeah.
position, first thing
my
on their
ranch, my
website
farm,
is,
da-da-da.
I'm a
Yeah.
7th generation Idahoan. My family has deep roots here, like always. But I've even seen people use it in conversations where
Mhm.
people will talk about zoning laws or what we should do about the roads or schools. And people just in casual conversation will be like, well, I'm a 7,000th generation Idahoan,
Yeah.
and this is how we've always done it.
Yeah, and therefore I have more of a right to like my opinion than
Mhm.
you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is. It's they view it as like credibility, or I even think sometimes it's kind of like a dominance thing. Like,
Totally. 100%.
oh, you've only been here for this many years. Well, my family's been here since 1872.
Yeah. Yeah.
So clearly I understand what's happening more. So yeah, that was something that I even have people ask me sometimes, are you from here? And I've lived in Boise for a decade, but I grew up in Idaho.
Mhm.
And I've had where I say like, oh yeah, I mean, I think if you've lived here for a decade, you're kind of
It counts.
from
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you
And
pay
so-
taxes. Like, come on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I've said, yeah, like, oh yeah, I'm from here. And people are like, okay, but you weren't born here.
Yeah.
Like that is,
I know.
diminishing what I'm saying or my perspective or like my ability to exist here. So I agree with you, Blake. I think that is really something you see often.
It's very petty and it's also very ahistorical. I'm like, let's broaden the scope a little bit. But just to kind of like put a fine point on it, I guess what I want to circle back and say is that, yes, people have a lot of kind of preconceptions about who you are, maybe if you've just moved here, especially from California, sorry. But I think that like sometimes if you feel like the city and the folks that you're around aren't reacting to you, aren't really like picking up what you're putting down, I think just kind of stick to your guns a little bit. I think keep going. I feel like people will wait you out here and really like see if you are committed, because we are a bit of a slow town, and so I think that people kind of let you earn your place, no matter how you kind of feel about that. So I guess that's one tip is like if you just feel like you aren't connecting and like vibing on the way that the frequency that you want to be, just hang in there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it takes time, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's the sort of interesting. I think you hit the nail on the head when it's like the thing that it feels like people are watching for is like, are you just a consumer, or are you going to be like a participant?
Yes.
And I think that's a normal tension to see with any sort of like transient community or sort of immigrant or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But here, like the number of people I've met here who've been around a long time, just prod hard enough, you're like, oh, you're not from here
Yeah.
either. Because
Yeah.
I do feel like Idaho historically has this quality where people go to disappear, to
Yeah.
get away from other places. And in a sense, it still maintains that haven-like quality of, quote unquote freedom of whatever. But that dynamic is definitely like, it's in the texture of people
Yeah.
I feel I meet
Yeah,
here.
absolutely. I think an addendum to what both of you have brought up, I think I would say absolutely still a survival rule in Boise is if you have recently moved here or haven't been from here very long, change your license plate.
Oh, I was going to say that. That's on my
Yeah,
list.
I know.
Absolutely.
You have, I'm sorry that's the way that it is,
Yeah.
but absolutely please change your license plate.
I
For some reason, that is just such a trigger point for people. When I was working as a nurse, we would have travel nurses come help with staffing and
yeah.
make sure
Yeah.
we were appropriately staffed. And I had one travel nurse pull me aside. She and I kind of became friends. And she was like, hey, like, I feel like Boise's pretty nice. But like her car got keyed. She's
Yeah,
had
I was
people
gonna say
yell
that
at her.
I've heard that so much. Yeah.
Yeah, people were yelling at her in the parking lot, and she's like, "I just came here to like help you guys because you don't have enough nurses." And
Yeah.
people scream at me when I'm getting my groceries, like, "What's up with that?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, where are you from?" And she had not changed her license plate. And I was like, okay, so if you can get your hands on an Idaho license plate just temporarily, I would absolutely do that, and that will go away.
I do feel that there are some exceptions like Montana and Alaska. I think if you have those license plate, you're like kind of fine.
Oh, it's like extra. It's brownie points. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
Yes.
actually they will like polish your car for you.
Yeah, literally.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's definitely depends on where you're coming from, because you're right. If it seems like you're more outdoorsy or more hardcore, then you're right
Yeah.
that
Right.
people will think you're superior. Like, thanks
Keep
for
that
coming.
pickup truck for sure.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
joining us in Boise.
Yeah. It's funny. I agree with you guys. It's like, it's ridiculous that is a tip that we have to give out. But I also find myself falling prey to it because recently I just had to change my registration on my car from being 2J Jerome County to a 1A. And I'm still really sad about it. This was many months ago. And I just feel like I lost that, like, I'm like, where's my blue collar chip now? I feel like I lost it and I'm so sad. But yeah. Do y'all... I'm curious. I'm always curious about this one. I never trust people's driving opinions anymore. Do y'all have any like driving related rules?
Well, I have two
Okay.
parts. One is a little more just like anecdotal. I try to at all costs avoid driving in the rain at night
Okay.
because we don't have like that
Yeah.
reflective paint. So I feel like I'm
That's
a
so
hazard
true.
and I'm
Yeah.
lightly panicking every time it's raining at night and I'm driving, and I have astigmatism. It's just not, it's a hazard. It's really stressful.
Yeah, that's a real safety 101 situation. Yeah.
I'm not having a good time. If we could get that higher quality road paint, I'd feel a lot better about it.
I know.
My other one, not to be a downer, I guess, do not rush into the crosswalks. Like,
for sure.
Do
Oh, yeah.
not
Yeah.
rush into that. We've got a big problem with pedestrians being hit right now. And also, when you're at the light and it goes green, you don't have to put the pedal to the floor. You wait a second. Second glance, check for pedestrians, then you can go. It like takes you 1 second, could change your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I drove on the East Coast for a long time, and you talk about like insane drivers.
Yeah.
They exist there, but like, and when I moved here, I thought it would be slower, but actually, it's just different. It's I feel like people on the streets here are special in their own different way. Roundabouts is always chaotic, but also that sort of stop and start. That really there's a real capacity to beat red lights in a way that feels like, oh man, you're brave.
Yeah.
I would not have done that. And I think that sort of judgment or misalignment of judgment is something I'm still getting used to here. When folks are more aggressive than I was expecting. And so I don't know. I don't quite know what to suggest about my stereotypes about Boise drivers.
I know.
But I was not expecting such aggression.
Yeah. It's a really strange dynamic, I feel like, because you have a lot of like people like me who, I was driving a 4-wheeler at the age of 9, and like that's how I learned how to drive. And then you also have people who like grew up and spent like 30 years living in like Orange County and just driving in the suburbs constantly and then moved here. So like we just have a very strange mix of actual people on the road, and it makes for some interesting driving things. One thing I will say, Boise, this is the year. Oh my gosh, we have to learn how to zipper merge on I-84. We have to learn how to do it.
Oh, yes.
I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of people not understanding how to zipper merge.
I love these hyper specific microphones. That's
But my
No,
heart
but
rate
it's
just
so
went up.
real.
Like
it's very
yeah.
real. It's so true.
No, Blake, you're speaking to my soul here, because I live over near 10 Mile, and when I tell you, I have never had so much anxiety in my life as watching and then both trying to get on the highway. I feel like I take my life into my hands. It shouldn't be that dangerous. It shouldn't be that scary.
It's very simple, y'all. We can do it. I believe in us.
It's so true.
Oh, I'm so glad you have that faith in people, Blake.
Well, we must cling to it in these ever-changing times. Yeah.
Hi, I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast. The best way to learn a language is immersion, living where the language is spoken and using it every day. That's how I learned French as a kid. But if that's not in the cards for you this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. I live in a city with a huge immigrant population. You probably do too. And in my hometown, a lot of my new neighbors speak Spanish as a first language, and we have lots of great Mexican and Central American and South American restaurants and stores. I wanted to be able to communicate just a little bit better with some of my neighbors. So I started with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. And after just a few extremely enjoyable weeks learning Spanish with Babbel, I've already gotten comfortable ordering at a restaurant and eavesdropping on my girlfriend's conversations with her mom. Look, learning a language isn't always easy, but with Babbel it is fun and it feels useful, basically immediately. That's why Babbel has over 16 million subscriptions sold. Plus, all of Babbel's 14 award-winning language courses are backed by their 20-day money-back guarantee. Here's a special limited-time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
The most exciting part of a vacation stay at a home rental? Easy. It's being greeted upon arrival with a rusted lockbox affixed to the underside of a stranger's condo. Yeah, you simply twist knobs, click gears, jiggle it, and then rip it off its moorings, and voila! Your prize is a key to a questionable home rental and maybe tetanus. When you just want to get your vacation started by actually getting into your room, it matters where you stay. At Hilton, we deliver your key right to your phone on the Hilton Honors app. Hilton for the stay.
All right, Nick, do you have any more survival rules or essential tips that you found living in this area are great for surviving in Boise?
That's interesting. I'm looking at the last two things I jotted here, and in this sense, they are interactive with each other. On the one hand, I was going to say that Google Maps is your friend in terms of finding places that, if you just want to explore, driving around is not necessarily the best because there's a lot of really hidden spots that you can only sort of either pick up. If you kind of just played around the keywords on Google Maps like that, when I was sort of more interested in figuring out what other like food places to find, I would not have found, for example, Tarbush Kitchen, which is a very good. Yeah. But it also kind of connects with this other sort of thing that I'm beginning to really internalize is really this, in a sense, this town is like run on word of mouth. Right, the best trails, the most interesting trails are ones that you kind of have to learn from a person who knows. I think that's also true for events to get into or certain scenes. Like it is a town where I think collective knowledge just kind of is ambiently floating about. And the longer you're here, the more it will sort of organically enter you by osmosis.
I agree, and I think that is really what we were talking about earlier too, about how it's so important to, go to breweries or go to these spaces where you're building these connections, because you're really going to need those if you want to find out like the great locations, what's happening and how to get there, or, what are the things to be doing.
I have a tip kind of related to that. Almost the opposite, but I think that it's still related to like getting to know your city. I wish when I'd first moved here, I moved here in like 2018. And so I wish when I'd moved here that I had just like gotten in my car or even just like spent a lot of time on maps, just figuring out like a few kind of like all of the arterial roads. Like I think that like I just didn't spend time learning some roads that like still to this day, like 6 years later, I still get a little bit confused. Like Overland, Cloverdale, Vista, Curtis, State, and Fairview, I feel like are the ones that like you need to know. So just like learn where they are now, learn what they connect to. It's also like a good like conversation point, like where you can kind of pick up what someone is trying to say. If they say like, oh, I live out there, then you just have like a general sense. Like it's just a good way to learn about the people around you and the space around you.
Yeah, really orient yourself. My next rule is very similar, but maybe to a different target audience. As a mom, there are amazing parks in Boise and the surrounding cities. Really just fantastic parks, but they aren't usually on like a main thoroughfare. That you're not just going to drive past them and see this really amazing park. So many of them are tucked into subdivisions or are next to schools that might not be the schools that your kids go to. And so I have had a lot of success just like type parks in or whatever activity it is you want to do. But specifically for families, if you want to find these amazing parks, and there are parks that have water features and really cool places to, work with sand and build sand castles and things. And they're so unique to this area, but you really have to look for them. They aren't just going to pop out as you're going about your day-to-day life. And so, yeah, you really have to either look on Google Maps or have the really good friends who will tell you where those nice parks are. But there are fantastic parks. You just have to know where they are.
Absolutely. That's such a good point. Really, and you kind of want that from some of the best parks to be sort of away from the arterial thoroughways, right? Not next to a major street or with, all the fumes coming out. And absolutely, that's so true.
Yeah. Okay, so we've really hit on all of the social and cultural aspects of Boise, different rules for those kind of things. Do either of you have any political rules for Boise?
Yes, I do. So I write the Hey Boise newsletter, and we talk about parks, we talk about breweries and all of that business, but we also talk a lot about politics. So this is something that I think about a lot, and also, as a queer person, my identity is quite politicized here, and so this is something that I have to be thinking about. So my advice, which, this isn't really a rule, this is just a piece of advice. If you've moved from a big city that has a certain kind of political dynamic within it, or you're from a small town, whatever, kind of running the gamut, don't expect that if you have one kind of thing in common that you would take for a political identifier, like if someone's also queer, for example, or is also a parent, or even just lives in your neighborhood, just don't think that you understand someone's political leanings until they've explicitly told you what they are.
And even then,
yes.
Compare some books. Let's start a book club. Let's talk about this because
that's right. Throw some baiting questions. See what's up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And also be willing to put yourself out there. Within reason. Keep yourself safe, but also be honest too. We need a little bit more of that. Because a lot of people here are really uncomfortable talking about politics. For white people of, a certain level of affluence, it's very possible and very doable to grow up and live in such a bubble in Boise and to feel really unaffected by a lot of the politics of the state. Now, that has kind of changed in the last few years, particularly with abortion legislation and some of the anti-queer legislation as well. But a lot of people really live in kind of this, I'm using air quotes here, apolitical bubble. Mm-hmm. And that can be really, it can be really alarming when you're talking to someone that you think that you're on the same page with, and suddenly they maybe just don't react in the way that you expected them to. You can find fascists in the North End, and you can find like super hardcore leftists in Eagle. We need to have more open conversations about that, because Idaho can be a bit of a haven for really far-right ideology here, and people are absolutely fooling themselves if they think that that's not also happening in Boise. Yes. So just don't take it for granted.
Yeah, it's I was sort of hearing that. I was sort of processing to the extent to which Boise feels somewhat unique in its, let's call it political opacity a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you could sort of make the argument in other cities, it always kind of clusters of neighborhoods to some extent. But as you sort of raised in your point there, there's a certain there's a real kind of real mystery sometimes. It's a really strange political place. I'm talking about Boise specifically. I mean, Idaho, blood red state to a large extent, but I think it has a lot to do with that gentility. It has a lot to do with this sort of the preservation of the upper middle class aesthetic, or the middle class aesthetic that's been here. That's now honestly being punctured over the past 10 years with the rise in rents and housing prices. I've met right-wing queer people here in a way that feels very oh wow, I have not seen this particular constellation of political ideology before.
Yes.
More common here than in other cities, at least.
I agree. And riffing off of that, I think it is a mistake to assume how someone presents will tell you
yes
where they stand politically, socially, culturally. I had an experience where I was walking into a store and somebody from a car was like, hey, I think I know you from somewhere. You look familiar. And he was giving very much Second Amendment, don't tread on me. And I was like, oh, should I run in the store?
Yeah.
I'm very concerned.
What do you
now.
mean you know me?
Yeah, what do you mean you know me?
Yeah.
I'm a little, should I get out my phone? I'm a little concerned now. And he's like, oh, I love your content on TikTok. I just can't believe people are saying that. And, that's so unusual here. And I, from judging a book by its cover, I thought we were going to be having a very different conversation.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a really, like you said, it wasn't a rule. I think it is a rule that people are not going to necessarily be what you think they are or what first impressions give. And
also, I think to that too as well, like give people the grace of respecting that everyone's on the journey. I think that like as a queer person who grew up in really rural Idaho, like I was saying stuff 3 years ago that like I would not agree with now. Everyone's on a journey. Boise is so isolated, kind of just geographically, that little opinions like percolate up, and someone might say something that they 6 months down the line are like just completely disagree with.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one because we kind of have to be in the depths with each other, and like it can take a lot of effort for anyone who, especially, I mean, I feel like especially for people of color here, like that is a really difficult thing to navigate, but that is part of life here. It really is.
Totally. But that's also why you come to a place like this. Like Boise's growing, right? Yeah. I mean, it is much bigger than it used to be, but it is still a place where you can feel connected to every layer of the community.
Yeah.
And that means getting into these kinds of frictions and the drama of human toil and life. Like that's why we're here.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, why not subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter for even more essential local tips? We'll be back tomorrow morning with what the Supreme Court abortion ruling means for Idaho. You won't want to miss it.